The last story we're going to talk about is, again, kind of falls into that weird, fun type of story. What happened was, back in 1963, Maxwell Hunter II, which basically means junior. Nobody calls you the second. But anyways, Maxwell Hunter, he worked for the National Aeronautics and Space Council. He writes a letter to Robert Packard, who is in the Office of the International Scientific Affairs. And it is a paper on aliens. And it's fascinating because it is written at the level of technological exploration as of 1963. So he wrote it in the year 1963. We hadn't been to the moon yet. We hadn't discovered any other planets around other suns. And he addresses these things. He goes, we don't know how our solar system was created. We still are not entirely for sure how our solar system was created. So he talks about an original theory that our solar system was created when two suns passed really close next to each other. And it, I guess, was pulling plasma off of one sun, and it created these planets. And he goes, if that was the case, then solar systems must be incredibly rare, because how could that happen, multiple times? Then in the next paragraph, he goes, but we know that's not true anymore. Our new theory is that solar system was created as some sort of disk, and I bet you they're everywhere. And this was before we knew that. This was, again, before we knew there were planets orbiting almost every star. He does mention that. He goes, new theories are that there are planets orbiting all sorts of stars. So technically, there's an uncalculable amount of planets out there. So it was interesting seeing how he's sussing it out. And he goes, if there's an unlimited amount of planets, then the chance of life evolving on these other planets is much higher than if it's like a one-off thing of two suns passing each other. He then goes on to talk about how he talks about the moons of Mars. It's funny because, again, 1963, he spends a good amount of deal with aliens on Mars. He's like, they have the canales on Mars. And the line, and this is two high-level government officials talking, he's writing this to another high-level government official. He says the canales are the straight lines. He goes, but you'll see where they make an intersection, there's like a circle. And he goes, every canale goes from one point, one like structure or mountain, to another structure or mountain. I've never seen one just dead end in the middle of nowhere. So at this point, they were still thinking that the canals on Mars could be made by intelligent life. He goes on to say that every lunar probe we've sent up has failed. So it is possible that there are aliens on the moon shooting them down or deactivating them in some way. Again, this is government officials in 1963 talking about this, and he goes into this thing about there's basically three types of aliens that we have to think about. Or really, there's only three types of aliens in general. He goes, there's ones that are on Mars. And he does say, modern science is saying that there is most likely no other life in our solar system. So he does address that. He's not a total idiot, but he's still just postulating these things. He goes, well, they say that there's no life in our solar system, and they're probably right, but it's something that we should address as a government. He goes, there's a chance that there is life on Mars, and they're using chemical rockets to travel from Mars to the moon. He goes, we're picking up heat signatures on the moon. We've found thermal vents on the moon now on the dark side that we've registered with our heat instruments or whatever. And he goes, it's possible that what is happening is why we're picking up thermal vents on the dark side of the moon along the edge is because there is a mining operation from Mars that is expanding across the moon. And so originally they were fully in the dark side of the moon, but as the mining operation has evolved, they've had to move closer and closer to the rim. He said the Martians, if this is the case, are most likely using chemical rockets. And he goes into this big thing about how escaping Mars's gravity is much less than escaping Earth's gravity. And he says if you're flying from Mars to the moon, there's really not much propulsion needed as opposed from the Earth to the moon. Or from Mars to Earth. He goes, aliens could come down here from Mars, but the amount of force they would need to then leave our planet wouldn't be worth it. So he goes, if there are, again, it's so fascinating. He goes, if there are aliens on Mars and they have chemical rockets, they must be, and I'm putting words in his mouth, shitting their pants right now. And he's like, if they're just using chemical rockets and we're at atomic age, then they have a serious problem. He goes, the next type of aliens that we could possibly see are aliens that are moving 2/3 the speed of light. He goes, Einstein says that you can't move faster than the speed of light. However, And then it's fascinating. I know I keep using that word, but he says, if half to 3/4 the speed of light. If you had a ship flying at that level, and the galaxy is 100,000 light years across, if it was even just going average half the speed of light, and on average they stopped every 10 light years for a 20-year stay at a solar system to deposit colonists, refuel, build extra ships, it would only take 200,000 years, starting at the center of the galaxy, to spread throughout the whole system. Since the earliest known remains of man have been dated at approximately 1,700,000 years, a sustained drive for merely 200,000 years may not be unreasonable. Of course, and then this is his interesting quote here, of course, if we were to run across representatives of this kind of interstellar race, they would not be nearly as tame as the previously hypothesized chemical Martians, and our policy would need to be revised accordingly. Fortunately, travel time restrictions would inhibit their ability to bring all their forces to bear in case we develop differences of viewpoint. So what he's saying is that, yes, let's say that it does take them 200,000 years to get to every planet, and let's say that they get here. Let's say the journey for them to get from their homeworld to us, along setting up colonies along the way, takes 50,000 years, because they're moving at half the speed of light. If we went to war, because again, these are government officials, this 1963, this is what they're thinking of. If we went to war, even their nearest colony may be 10,000 years away. So you would have that distance to buffer it. So you would be able to wage war, beat them back, and then 10,000 years to prepare for the next wave. They wouldn't have those instantaneous reinforcements. But the last form of alien life that he talks about is Einstein's theory may be wrong, and people may be able to travel beyond the speed of light. And he goes, if that's the point, there's an interesting quote, if we were to meet such a race, our policy had better be to negotiate fast, because the implications of their far better understanding and control of the fundamental forces of nature would be obvious. If all the scientific speculation were to turn out wrong, and we were to stumble across an alien race, we would want to know as quickly as possible which of the 3 types I have indicated it was, as our diplomatic policy would damned well be influenced by the results. So if it's chemical Martians, we're the top dog. And chemical Martians means they're using chemical fuel for their rockets. If it's a species that takes tens of hundreds of thousands of years to reach us, we'll fight them and we'll beat them. And by the time they come back, we'll be on their level. But if ships just appear in our solar system tomorrow, come out of warp, drop out of light speed, whatever you want to say, now we got serious problems. Because not only can their ships get here incredibly fast, so they're going to have constant reinforcements, they're going to have resupplies, things like that. They are dealing with technology that we didn't even know existed outside of fiction. And this would be things that the government would have to plan for. Governments have, the US government has run tests on like what would happen if zombies attacked, what would happen if aliens attacked. They have to run these games because they have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for anything. I've always wondered, has the US military ever won a war game on a Godzilla kaiju type scenario? Where generals get around and they go, today we're running a scenario. There is a 50-foot tall creature appearing off of the coast of California. What do we do to minimize casualties? And they have to sit there and they got to figure everything out. Okay, well, we'll have this strike force moving here. Okay, this creature has this type of abilities, so it can fly and it can breathe fire, and its skin is resistant to almost all normal ordnance. How do we take care of this? And they just run the game. Just to be prepared. Part of it would be like they got all this awesome hardware and simulation software. They're like, dude, what if America had to fight like 500 Spartans? Like, you would be running simulations. America would win against 500 Spartans, but you would be running simulations just because it's Saturday night and you're drunk. But I think you would also be running simulations to say, what would happen if tomorrow a kid in Omaha found an amulet that turned him into Superman? Run the simulation. Why not? You have to be prepared for this stuff. What would happen if Hoover the Talking Seal became president of the United States and we had to form a junta against him and all they could say was, hello there, come over here? So the government does talk about this stuff and they plan for it. And this guy wrote this paper and it survives to this day and you can read it online. And yeah, just crazy. Who knows what other simulations that they've run, what other papers like this are out there saying this is what we have to be prepared for if we meet an interdimensional demonic race, or if hell opened up tomorrow off the coast of Aruba, how would we battle these creatures? I don't know. Maybe that's more offset, because this guy's obviously using scientific information to talk about these aliens. But as the farther you go down the line, it was also interesting because he mentioned God and religion a couple times in this too. And again, it's 1963 America. You would be fine putting that stuff. He's like, God may have created a life. So yeah, it was just, it's kind of this little time capsule of how people looked at things back then. And it was a time capsule that was created before all of our modern advancements with high-powered telescopes, landing on the moon for one, and going to asteroids and dropping rovers and stuff like that. It's a neat little piece of history. Well, that was a fun episode. There was no stories that were completely depressing that involved kids killing themselves, or serial killers, or mind control, or super soldiers, or anything like that. That's not what it's going to be like tomorrow. This was kind of a one-off episode, but I just wanted to tell some fun stories tonight. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. We're coming up to October, so that's when we get into the really spooky stuff. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.